Welcome to Devon and Cornwall Power BI User Group. Today's session is all about data storytelling and why should I care by Laz. Just to draw your attention to our next speakers for the next few weeks, you can see them listed here, but I hope that you can join us. So in the meantime, without any further ado, let me hand over to Laz, who will take us through data storytelling and why should I care.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining the session today, and of course Sue, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. So it is the first time I'm presenting at Devon and Cornwall user group, so really excited to share my knowledge, right, on creating reports that are more insightful for everyone, right, by adopting a data storytelling approach, right? And what am I hoping we all get by the end of today's session? Well, really, I'm hoping we all walk away with a few strong tips on how to approach reporting before we even launch Power BI Desktop, right? So that's the point to take away. Now, before I jump into it, I thought just a little quick intro to me as well. I always feel like it's a nice way to start off. So my name is Lazaros Viastikopoulos, but that's a fairly long name, so everyone just calls me Laz, right? Very much focused on everything, anything front-end analytics, all right, and that's where majority of my experience lies. Very much enjoy working with clients to derive requirements that align to business objectives. Very much enjoy rolling out training sessions and more so supporting organizations on the Power BI adoption journey, right? As of now, I'm the Power BI practice lead at a consultancy called Datis, and just briefly, if anyone hasn't heard of Datis, we're a advanced analytics AI consultancy, but recently we were acquired by Telefonica Tech, right? I'll definitely say my passion subjects all are data storytelling as well as data governance. I spend a lot of time there as well. Feel always so important to have the fundamentals in place, that foundation before we embark on our Power BI journey. And on top of that, I saw something a bit more random, non-data related, but maybe a bit of my nerd coming out of me, right? Nearly completed collecting all the Pokemon set for Cosmic Eclipse, if you believe it or not, right? And it's not just me, it's my partner as well, so big Pokemon fans. But anyway, that's me all. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and if you don't maybe feel comfortable asking questions here, you can always reach out afterwards as well on anything we speak about. So with that said all, let's go ahead and start off by looking at the agenda. So we'll start off with a short intro to, well, what is data storytelling, right? And I'm not going to spend too much time here. More we're going to understand, well, where do we start from? Because that's a common question I usually get. Moving on from that, we're going to go ahead and explore the question of why should you care? And we're going to explore this question by having a look at some of the common challenges that I regularly find working with different customers and different clients as well, right? We're then going to move on to see what Gartner says, right? And that relates to how we measure the return on investment. Moving on from that, we're going to explore what are the 4 things to do before any design work, right? Before you think about data viz, before you think about the right visual for the right context, before you launch Power BI Desktop. And this will be sort of a summary from all the things above as well. And lastly, I want us to finish up on bringing it all together by exploring the 4 parts of a compelling story, the things we should be collecting with a bit of an example of a storyboard as well, right? So hopefully that sounds like a good agenda, right? And let's get into the content. So we are going to start off, like I said, with what is storytelling. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, right? I'm sure you've all seen this visual. Just type in storytelling on Google Images. This is probably the first thing that'll pop up front and center, right? But really, all storytelling, I like to explain easily by take the visuals, take the data, take the narrative, and presenting it all through an easy to understand report, right? Now, I'm not going to spend more time on that, but here's the thing. Where do we start, right? That's a question that is very common. Where do we begin with this? Lads, we understand what storytelling is. Lads, we understand the benefits of it as well, but where is our starting point, right? And what I like to always say, or our starting point, or what we should focus on, is the business objective or the challenge we are trying to overcome, right? Therefore, having a clear understanding of the where are you trying to go? What are you trying to achieve? That there should be our starting point. And by the way, we're going to see how this materializes as we go through the slides as well, right? And also, by adopting a storytelling approach, our solutions become more memorable, more engaging, more persuasive, right? And put us on the path to promoting more actions as well. And there's quite a few interesting studies out there as well. I should put some of the links in regards to whether something is more memorable, engaging, or persuasive if you explain it through a story or through logic as well, right? So really interesting stuff around this. Okay, we now have seen what is data storytelling, right? We've also seen where should we start from. But here's the thing, right? Why? Why should we put additional effort and additional time to adopting a data storytelling approach when it'll probably just increase maybe the time of the project, sort of, right? Why not simply, right? Why not simply just follow the traditional approach, I like to say, of, hey, what do you want and how do you want to see it, right? Well, because I find that it usually, not always, right? It usually leads to the following result, right? And I wanted to make this a bit more fun, but we'll jump into the details, right? So it always starts off with that wow moment, everyone, right? When we first introduce the report to the users or to the audience, everyone loves it, right? They can't wait to start using it, exploring it. They even can't even wait to come in on a Monday morning, believe it or not, so they can start using these new features and capabilities to derive insight, you know, the honeymoon period sort of thing, right? That's the first stage. We then go on to the use stage, I like to call it, maybe in week 1, right? Some usage, right? It sort of continues into the next week, sort of people still exploring the report, but something is missing, right? And we get into maybe that bit of decline in usage stage, right? And then we go into a bin stage, right? I have been here before multiple times, right? Not ashamed to say it, right? Not the nicest of feelings. The users have reverted to the previous solutions they were using beforehand, right? All the time and effort we've put into building the reports has gone wasted, right? Now, this is why we should care about data storytelling or embedding a storytelling approach into our reports, right? It helps us avoid a set of common challenges that I regularly find that lead us to that last stage there, bin in the report. So now, what do I mean by bin in the reports? I simply mean reports that are underutilized or reports that are not adopted. Okay, so with that said, what are some of these challenges that I find regularly, right? And that I help data storytelling can help us avoid? Well, the first one is the audience does not know what they want, right? And having that storytelling approach, all right, it offers us an approach, a structure to asking the right questions to help the audience articulate what is needed. Now, this is not me simply saying the audience does not know what they want. Of course they know what they want. They're the best people to understand what they need. They understand their role in the business. What we need to do, though, is help them articulate those business requirements onto the canvas. And that's the challenge, right? Apart from that, another common challenge I find, right, is the audience asks for everything. Really common, right? And again, having that storytelling approach, well, it always starts with a purpose. It always starts off with have that clear focus of where you're trying to go, right? What's your goal? What's your objective? And the great thing about that, if we start from there, well, it really helps us funnel down everything else that is being collected to that single purpose or objective, right? So it helps us reduce having all the clutter onto the report. Apart from that, another common challenge I find is the audience asks us to rebuild an existing report. Surely we've all seen that, right? And again, that data story process, it allows us, like I said, to ask the right questions, but most importantly, to understand the why. So why should we rebuild this solution in Power BI? Why? What extra value does it offer us, right? And another common challenge I regularly find is the audience does not provide any KPIs, or they provide too many KPIs. And again, a set of tailored questions in a workshop format, we can derive relevant KPIs, right, that are linked to one of our purposes or one of our objectives. And the great thing about that is very early on in the process, if we can see there is nowhere we're trying to go, and if there are no KPIs to understand if we're moving towards that, it's a point to pause and really think about where are we going right now, right? Now, here's the thing, all. I find that if we tackle these challenges, these will help us avoid another set of challenges, right? Animations don't let me down. There we go. Okay. So they help us avoid another set of challenges, right? Reports with no true purpose. In other words, reports that are not linked to a business objective, a business element, right? Another one it helps us avoid is reports just pushing people through endless analysis, endless scrolling. There is no end goal in sight. Don't get me wrong, these are usually very rich in features and capabilities, but they just continuously promote that endless analysis, right? Reports that don't promote action. Another one is reports that are too busy by trying to satisfy too many audiences' needs as well, right? And the other one of my all-time favorite ones all is reports that incorporate requirements that were gathered in advance from the wrong audience, right? That's one of my personal favorites. So I'm hoping that we now start to see how data storytelling can really help us advance our reports by avoiding these set of challenges that are really common to me, right? Okay, so we now have seen what data storytelling is. We saw where we should be starting from and explored a little bit of why we should care. Now, there is, though, one additional element of why you should care, but I really wanted to put a little bit more focus on this, everyone, right? As well, after all, it's all about measuring the return on investment, right? So let's go ahead and explore it. And we'll explore it by understanding, well, how would we traditionally measure the ROI or the value of a report, right? Well, that would be possibly by looking at the report usage logs, right? Look at the report usage logs, how many people are accessing it. In fact, when I ask this question several times, I get two answers, right? Or when asking it. The first one is, oh, it's extremely easy to measure the ROI of a report. Just look at how many people are accessing it. Or the other one is, oh, it's actually quite challenging to measure the ROI of a report. Let's look at how many people are accessing it instead, right? However, here's the thing. People viewing the report does not drive up the ROI, right? What I like to say, it's not, it's what we do with the data. It's not how many times we view it, right? So with that said, let's go ahead and see some things that are picked out from Gartner and how it relates to this, right? So here we are. In 2023, right, they mentioned that most data analytics leaders, well, they struggle to articulate the value that they deliver for the organization in business terms, right? So it's becoming harder to measure the ROI for data analytics projects, right? And I've added the links in there as well. The sources do have a really interesting, right? Now, one thing I want to be super clear on, everyone, though, right? This was not made in relation to dashboarding or reporting or this area I like to focus on of front-end analytics. It was made in relation to data analytics projects as a whole, right? But from my years of experience, I certainly see so much truth in this, right? So in other words, it's a challenge to try and link our reports back to an increase in revenue or a decrease in expenses, mitigating risk, and so on, right? Also very interesting, Gartner predicts, as we can see on the screen, Gartner predicts stories as opposed to dashboards to be the widespread way of consuming analytics by 2025, right? So with these two things in mind, I now taken two more quadrants for us, right? And these were taken from the Super Data blog, highly recommend it, really good design for things on there, which I believe also came from the Gartner Data Analytics 23 conference again. And you can tell it's from Gartner because it's quadrants, right? They do love a quadrant. So with that said, what are we seeing on screen? Well, on the left-hand side, we have a quadrant relating to tactical elements, right? And again, please do remember, these were relating to data analytics as a project as a whole, but I see truth in this for reporting, right? On the left-hand side, we have tactical elements that should be linked to our reports to measure the ROI. And as you can imagine, these are your more classical elements or things to think of, right? Such as my report led to an increase in sales or a decrease in cost and expenses and so on. On the other side, though, we have the more strategical elements, right? And well, these should be linked to our reports to measure the ROI as well, right? But these are the more long-term financial influencing elements rather than the tactical elements, which are more direct financial influencing instead, right? However, and another thing I should call out actually is the idea was that we should try and assign one of these strategic elements to our data analytics projects, right? However, what I find from a reporting perspective many times is we can't even link one of the more tactical elements to a report to measure the ROI, let alone one of the more strategical ones, right? And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying our reports can't tell us or help us monitor revenue. Of course they do. The point I'm making is it's a challenge to link a report and say this caused revenue to go up or something else to happen in the organization, right? So with that said, let's at least try to start and link one of the more tactical elements to our reports before we even start thinking of something more of the strategical side, right? So to go back to the question of why should we care? I find data storytelling helps us create reports that provide value to the business and allow us to measure the ROI. And we'll see this more as we go through the slides, right? Okay, I want to pause there for a moment, if that's okay, to see if are there any questions in from anyone?
No, not any questions, just lots of chit chat and positive. Oh, there is a question, Jude.
There we are. Hi,
Do you
Jude.
want to unmute yourself, Jude?
Thank you, Sue, for setting it up, and thank you for running it, Lazaros. So, Laz, one question is, how do you tease the requirements out of your customers? Do you ask any particular questions? Something that really helped me was defining targets with them and trying to get them to commit to targets that you can then display on there and show offsets against targets as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that as well, Jude, I do have a slide afterwards where we'll explore that a little bit, if that's okay, since we do have a slide dedicated to that, but definitely a good question. But yeah, I agree with your approach as well. Set a set of targets beforehand, keeps everyone accountable for those, but we'll definitely answer that on the next slide. Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, thank you, Jude. It's always a bit daunting to unmute and speak, so I really appreciate you doing that. Audience interaction is a joy for us as a presenter, so well done. No, just a quick question. Are you sharing the slides afterwards?
Yeah, I'm happy to share the slides.
Yep. Okay, yeah, no, brilliant. Just lots of thumbs up, we've got another question from Harshid. Have I pronounced it correctly, Harshid?
Yes, you have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just give me a second. Right, so basically, I understand that you got to find the sources of revenue. But well, say if you're sort of digging down into the data and you find, yes, this could be a possible thing. Can you do that, or is it organizational led, if that makes sense?
I didn't quite understand the question, Harshid. Is it whether we start more with a top-down or a bottom-down approach? Is that correct?
No, right. So basically, when you say data storytelling, I'm thinking is, for example, if you do your own investigation, right,
Yeah.
and then you find, for example, like say there's an issue with revenues that's related to this bit, and say
Yeah.
this doesn't conform to as to what they are looking for, is it still okay to tell your story? Does that make sense? Is that clearer?
Yeah. So just to give you, I've answered correctly. I guess there's the different ways to look at it for data storytelling, right? I guess the way I approach it is to work with the end users or with the audience to derive a story with them, right? So and you'll see that more in the next slides as well, by the way. It's about starting more at the high level, for example, of where you'll be trying to go. Let's define what is that purpose? What is that? Where are you trying to go? And then from there, we work our way down to then derive a story or have stories embedded within our reports as well. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. If not, happy to pick up afterwards as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Harshid. I think
Thank
it'll all
you.
become clearer as we move forward.
Yep.
But good question.
Okay, so we've now gone through what we've gone through. What is data storytelling, right? We saw the why should we care? We saw some of the common challenges that are reduced by data storytelling. And we also explored the importance of assigning a business element, right, to our reports to measure the ROI, right? And again, sort of to go back to that a little bit, rather than just simply look at the report usage logs of how many people are accessing our reports, well, if we set a clear purpose, we know if we're moving towards that purpose or if we've achieved that purpose. And that should be a measurement of the ROI instead, right? But anyway, let's now go ahead and explore 4 things I would say we should be doing before you launch Power BI Desktop. And that's going back to the original point that I made at the start, right? What are the 4 things we should be doing before we launch Power BI Desktop to put us on the path to create more insightful reports, right? So here it is. The first one is find the audience. I know many might say, well, that's just really obvious, isn't it, lads? But if there's one thing I want you all to take away from today's session, and one thing that I always emphasize quite a lot, is find the audience. From my experience, the number one reason why reports fail is because we've not involved the actual end users in the requirement gathering process, right? In fact, I can see reports already going downhill from the moment we don't include the actual people who would be using the reports, right? And instead, what do I usually see? Well, I usually find it might be a group of seniors or a group of individuals that might have a bit of influence in the organization who, well, they claim they understand the needs of the end users, but they truly don't grasp the day-to-day challenges of those end users, right? Now, if for any reason we are to start gathering all the requirements, building a story from any person that isn't the actual audience, I would raise a risk there as well, right? And here's the other thing, though. It's also on the other end, right?
Those other ones go down in the above here.
Sorry, was there a question? Sorry, I didn't quite grasp that. Sorry, so you're on mute as well. If there's a question, feel free to add it in. If that was a question, feel free to type it in the chat as well. Or let me know. But the other one I was going to say around find audience, or the other issue I usually find is if we try to satisfy too many audiences' requirements, that also usually leads to overly complicated reports that lack focus, right? And again, I've been in these scenarios way too many times. So my general rule is here, if we are going to be collecting the requirements from more than one audience, let's at least try our best to make sure that there is a related purpose of where we're trying to go to, right? Okay, the other thing, before launching Power BI Desktop, or identify the ROI, right? We spend time and resources on the project. We need to understand the ROI, right? And like we said before, that question, where are you trying to go? And that where you're trying to go should be linked to one of those business elements, back to your business objectives. And by the way, it doesn't have to be those 4 elements that I put up from the quadrant from Gartner. Think about your organization. Every organization is different. They have different objectives, different principles, different places they want to get to as well. The idea is, if we're building a new dashboard, right, in Power BI, it should be sort of categorized into one of these areas, right? And too often I find that we simply just run away with a set of tasks, right? And we don't actually take a pause to think about, okay, well, we're delivering this, but what value is it offering to the organization, right? What's the expected ROI here? And the way I sort of also approach this when gathering requirements, especially at the beginning stage of storytelling, I try to stay away from talking technology completely, right? Especially in that first initial session. And I know that might sound a tad odd, right? But the idea is, I find it's quite a distraction when we're talking about the different features and capabilities of Power BI and the different visual types, or maybe the branding, etc. What I really want to focus in on is the business challenge, the value we're looking to deliver. Let's start with these things first, and I promise there'll always be a stage afterwards to explore all the other things as well, right? Another one, I'm sure we've all been here before as well. I want to ingest the last 5 years of data in our semantic model. I want 30 KPIs on the canvas because those are the priorities, and I want them all to be displayed versus last year and versus budget. Oh, and by the way, it needs to be sent out by PDF. And no, the business users do not want to access it through the Power BI service or Fabric, right? Look, there might be some genuine cases where this is justified, absolutely, but why, right? Why? And that's the point we're highlighting here. Ask those why questions very early on, because it allows us to tailor our solutions to the user's needs, right? I always describe it like this, and I've had these conversations in the past. The client, or maybe in your case, the internal stakeholder group, they are giving you the time or money, right? Not to just simply hear that everything is great or looks amazing. It's to give recommendations on how to create solutions that provide more insights, right? So that's ask why. Okay, we then come to tell a story, everyone, right? So in regards to telling a story, what do we mean by this? Create a storyboard, right? That's to simplify. And the key elements of a story is a narrative, because that steers the audience towards taking an action, or ideally that's what we hope it does, right? And worth calling out, right? There are so many approaches out here, all right? I've explored so many. Great content from Conas Baumer, Andy Kirk, or some of my personal favorites who influenced me a lot, Miko Yook and Stephen Fuel, right? And there's so many similarities. And here's the recommendations I'll give to everyone. I always say, take from these learnings, adapt it to yourself as well. And this is why. When you're gathering a story or requirements, it's not talking about technology, it's about interacting and collaborating with people and putting yourself in their shoes. So the point I'm making is, take such learnings and approaches and align it to your own character, to your way of working, to your way of asking questions. And I promise you that will work in your benefit more, right? So again, adopting that storytelling approach when collecting the reporting requirements, it helps us create those reports that are genuinely more engaging, persuasive, and memorable. Okay, so let's now go ahead and bring this a bit more together, right? By looking at parts to a compelling data story. So here we are. We have 4 parts to a story, everyone, right? Thought I'd make this a little bit more fun. We start with a mission. In a future town, Alexandria, the mission was very clear: increase sales by 10% by the end of financial year 2024. The radar, a high-tech tool tracking KPIs such as average transaction value and showing that they were off target. The villain, well, a group of unmotivated salespeople causing their average transaction value to plummet downwards. And Alexandria is desperate for a solution, so they summoned their legendary sales hero. The sales hero, armed with a glowing training manual, transformed the unmotivated salespeople into enthusiastic sellers, teaching them to upsell, cross-sell, and engage. So that's our story. And you can see a bit of my nerd coming out. I love superheroes, right? We have a mission, we have a raider, we have a villain, and we have a hero as well. Now, was that a little bit cheesy? Sure it was. But here's the thing, I like that stuff. And I promise you, you're going to walk away now knowing that there's 4 parts to this story that we're describing, right? But how do we make this all a little bit more relevant to us? I'm sure that's what you're all thinking, right? So here's the thing. The mission is your purpose, right? So what are we trying to do here? Where are you trying to go? The radar, your KPIs, right? Are we on target to where we're trying to go? The villain, the thing causing the blockers, holding us back, is the cause. And the hero, well, that there will be the actions. So once we've done the previous steps all, we've identified the audience, right? We go into that stage of doing a storyboard, right? Storytelling workshop to gather the requirements. And the output of this should be a storyboard like you're seeing. And on this storyboard, we should have these 4 elements. And over the years, I've changed this around to work for me as well. So let's get into it a little bit more. Some people want to call out here, what I put in the end, Miko Yook, Stephen Few, and you see how a lot of these have come from them and a few others as well, right? So we start off, everyone, with the purpose, right? I've done it for quite a few of these sessions. So we start off with the purpose. So understanding where you're trying to go, right? And this example here actually was with a group of regional managers for a retail, in a retail scenario, right? And I asked a set of different types of questions, right? And one of the questions I asked was, well, what keeps you up at night, right? And we followed up there more and more. And they said, well, hitting target, lads, right? And after a few more back and forth questions, we came to increase sales, right? Such as increase sales by 10% by the financial year 2024, right? And think about it. Do we want reports all that have a clear focus? Do we want reports that are not too busy, right? Or reports that can help us measure the ROI? Well, if we have that single purpose, as you can see on the slide now, it enables us to do these things because everything else we collect should be directly linked to this purpose, right? Everything else will be funneled down to this. If you think about a lot of those common challenges I mentioned at the beginning, they will help us resolve these, right? Okay, now just a few more things, I guess. One more thing I wanted to mention about the purpose as well. We should try to keep it as specific as possible, but from my experience, it's not always the case all, right? But even if it's not as specific as this or as detailed as this, I should probably say, the good thing is it still gives you some element of focus and it will help you avoid adding way too many KPIs or persuading the actual audience to remove KPIs that don't impact it as well, right? Okay, so once we have the purpose, we start asking a different set of questions, right, to derive the KPIs, right? And this should contain an actual and some form of target, all right? A KPI should always have some context to it, right? So for this report here, the purpose was increase sales by 10% by the end of financial year 24. Now, with that same audience, right, we stick to the same audience. We ask another set of questions, such as if you arrive in the office on a Monday morning and you're asked to give an update to the board, what's the first number you need to look at, right? And well, okay, lads, it's sales, right? The goal is to the purpose or the objective is to increase sales. Sales is the first one. Great. Let's add it onto the storyboard, right? We ask another set of questions, and then we derive more KPIs, such as average transaction value. Again, ask the question, does this genuinely help us get to the purpose? It does, because if the value of the transaction increases, the more the sales, the more we get closer to our purpose. The same with conversion percentage. How does that impact it? Well, the more people that walk into our stores and we convert them into, or we get transactions, it helps us get closer. So these are the sort of things you should be thinking about, I guess, when you're deriving this type of information, right? And it's worth maybe calling out that sometimes there will be many KPIs, right? And if there are too many KPIs, we should try and just prioritize which ones are the most impactful as well, right? And one thing, a tip that I usually find everywhere as well, please, I don't advise changing the canvas size to fit everything in as a good solution, right? I try to stay away from that as much as possible. Again, thinking about Stephen Few, keep everything at a glance. I know that can be interpreted in different ways, but the way I interpret that all is don't change the canvas size just to fit more in, right? Okay. Once we identify a KPI, that's when I think about, well, what is causing this KPI to be in the red, right? Why are we in the red? Why are we in the negative? And again, back to Stephen Few's principles. If you aren't aware of them, ask why. Why is KPI down, right? So in this example, we're going to stick to this one because it's one I derived in the past. The ATV is in the red, everyone, right? The answer I got after asking a few questions to derive this information here was, well, Laz, it's probably our salespeople are maybe low performing, right? Well, if that's the cause, add it onto the storyboard. And bear in mind, by the way, you're going to have more than one cause for each KPI as well, right? And again, ask a different type of questions to derive this type of information, but hopefully you're all starting to see something, right? If I started off this with, what do you want? How do you want to see it? Or simply say, show me the existing reports that you have, we wouldn't be having such deeper conversations to extract this story out, right? We then move on to the actions, everyone, right? And I'll be honest, these are genuinely the most challenging parts of these discussions, right? So we derived a strong purpose, we understand the KPIs, the causes. It's now bringing it together and asking, well, let's say it is in fact low performing salespeople. What is the solution, right? How can I go ahead and resolve this? And these are the types of questions we should be asking. And in this example that I got was, well, we can offer some training, right? Okay, great. So we put that on the storyboard as well, right? Now, this here all is a storyboard. I did cut it down a little bit because there was a lot more full when I was doing this as well, right? I changed a few stuff around, obviously. Now, once I do, only when I have this, only then do I start thinking about, well, let's move to the design phase, a wireframing stage, right? That's only when I decide to think about visuals, features, capabilities. That's only when I think about launching Power BI Desktop, everyone. Okay, so to finish up for the day, right? Common question I get, by the way, this is changing, right, based on feedback and so on. But here's the thing, how does this relate to a report, everyone? Yeah. Now, the purpose, when I have the audience land in the report, I like them to land on a homepage or a landing page where it directly tells them this report has been built for this purpose, linked to this business objective, right? This is the audience, this report, or where this is the audience we gathered the requirements from, right? Very clear, right from the beginning, you landed the report. And I always find that might help answer some frequently asked questions, such as, well, where are these data points? Why don't we include them in here? Well, because they don't impact the purpose of this report, right? I also like to embed it into the title as well. That's the purpose. The other part all is the KPIs, right? As you would imagine, the KPIs are front and center on the physical Power BI canvas, right? Back to Stephen Few, highlight the most relevant information. To me, The most relevant information, everyone, are the KPIs. Why do I say that? Because to me, if the KPIs are all in green, sometimes I say, well, should we really worry about anything, right? Add context as well, please, to all your KPIs, right? What about the causes all, right? Where do they go? Well, again, these are the ask why stuff, right? So think of them as the breakdown of the KPIs. You have your KPIs, right below them, you have another set of visuals that show you the breakdown by salespeople, by stores, or the correlation of weather with sales, etc. All these elements are down there. So we don't promote people just to do endless analysis and searching. If we have the likely causes, add them front and center. And I can imagine another question here might be, what if we don't know the causes? But I'll get back to that, right? Okay, and then we get to the actions as well, everyone, right? So where do the actions go? How do we use the information that we gathered from the actions, right? So if I go back to, well, the cause for ATV to be in the red is low performing salespeople. The action was to offer some training. Well, we can use this in two ways, right? One of the answers, one of the causes I recently got was, well, the Bank of England increasing interest rates, right? Well, the follow-up question was, well, what can we do? Yeah, sure, there are some ways to mitigate this or ease the pressure or the negative effects, but what can we genuinely do about this? Well, not much. So the point is, should we really use up our precious screen estate? If we can't do anything about that, should we not just remove it from the dashboard? That's the first way I use the actions. The second way I use the actions is to add supporting informational. So this is a real one as well. It was bespoke training sessions. So then we ask more questions, right? Ask about the process, ask about how do people join them. And what I found out was, well, there's not just one training session, Laz. There's multiple training sessions. There's one for brand. If our salespeople understand the brand, are where we came from and how we started off, the story, it'll be easier for them to discuss it. They'll be more motivated. Another set of training we have, Laz, is upselling and cross-selling, which is taught by a senior salesperson. Another type of training we have, Laz, is how do you approach a customer, but that's more selective because we have an individual from an external company coming in and teaching this. That's really valuable information for taking action. Against our salespeople, when we have them on the canvas, if you hover over maybe with a tooltip, you can see them. If you right click, drill through, see how we're now going to the features, drill through, you can see maybe a employee specific or a salesperson specific page. And apart from the performance, you can also see what training sessions they've attended on. In other words, it helps you understand what action to take, right? Okay, so to finish up, once we have the storyboard, there will be a point that we need to talk data. Because if you remember at the beginning, I did say I try to stay away from data, right? Or features and capabilities. But imagine as you progress through, you're going to have to eventually build this. So you need to understand what data is available as well. And the lovely thing is sometimes when you don't talk about the data and the features and the capabilities and you ask people to stay away, you might find some major gaps that currently exist, or you might find some places where you should be put in a process to collect that information because it will help the organization. And I have seen that, right? Okay. Once we have this, we then have a sign-off stage, right? You then move, of course, to designing it. Different ways to design wireframes, but that's a whole different session in itself, and the data visualization sides as well. You can start with something like PowerPoint. To be honest, that's where I spend a lot of time creating dashboards, wireframes. Moving on, you can use Figma if you want to as well. And then once you have that, again, I always wait to get the green light. That's when I launch Power BI Desktop Portal, right? So I hope you found that session useful, everyone, right? And understand that there's so much more to do before launching Power BI Desktop. So thank you everyone for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laz. We have quite a few questions,
Oh,
and
okay,
lots of claps and lots of thumbs up, and lots of people ready to fire salespeople as well. So
yeah.
go on, Harshid. If you ask, Harshid asked a question at the beginning about data storytelling being used in process improvements, and he's got his hand up. So unmute yourself, Harshid.
Okay, just one question. You know the previous slide. Can you go back to the previous slide?
This one here?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So basically, I think storytelling is a sort of data-driven exercise. Now, for example, you can draw out the KPI and cause from actual analysis of the data in Power BI.
Yeah.
Now, so action doesn't sort of fit into that process. So, right, so basically, for example, action is more like a sort of discussion that's an add-on rather than coming as a result from the Power BI analysis. So how would you get from a cause to action that's not in Power BI? I hope that question makes sense.
Sure. I'm trying to grasp it, but I guess, so I do get a lot of questions around the action part, but the idea is to put ourselves right from the beginning on the right path to create a solution that does promote action, right? And it's quite logical, I guess, from a purpose perspective. We understand that, right? A clear idea of where you're trying to go. You then derive KPIs that impact that individual where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you have a cause, right? And the cause are the things that are likely to keep you down. Where the action comes in play for me is, well, firstly, like I said, I want to validate whether the information on this solution is genuinely actionable, right? But yes, this is driven by the user in this aspect here. This is driven by the user. The user is going to tell me, well, what are the common actions we could possibly take to resolve this, which will, in essence, reverse the KPI from red to green and take us closer to our purpose, right? And again, from the action perspective, it's about, can we add more supporting information in there, right, in order to assist us to understand what action to take? But it's user driven. Yeah, it is user driven.
I like the idea of having the tooltip there, so that if you think, there's a certain group of salespeople that, are maybe down on their targets, you can look and see which training courses they've been on. And then if you had a nice little Power App built into it, or a flow, you could then send a flow to send them on to a training course. So you can take that action right from the actual report.
Precisely, yeah.
See if they have done the training. If they haven't, then action it from the report.
Yep.
Can I just say one thing? The one thing, right? So basically, well, the PowerPoints are excellent. I should mention that, and basically, well, it provides a good framework to look at storytelling. So thank you for that.
Yep. No worries. And one thing, I guess, from your question as well, one thing that came to mind actually was causes, right? I guess we're all probably aware of it, with the major buzzwords out there being AI as well and whatnot. I guess from a cause perspective, a common question that I always receive, by the way, that I didn't highlight was, well, I don't know the causes. We might know some of the causes, and ideally, in all honesty, and this is why it's so important to understand your audience. It must be the audience of the solution, because they should have some understanding of what might be causing the KPIs to be in the red. But if they don't know everything, that's when you can take advantage of visuals such as the key performance indicator visual, or the key influences visual, in Power BI, the AI influence one. What do you do on that? Think about it. Take all the numerical attributes from the KPIs. You can drag them on there one by one, of course. You can then drag on the other elements, right? So your descriptive attributes from your dimensions, and then you could maybe work out what might be causing it to be up or down as well. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. So you can use it as an exploratory analysis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Takami suggested that it's also good to understand people's skill level when using Power BI, and how competent they're going to be at using reports and dashboards.
Definitely. Yeah.
And Mark mentioned with your slide, why would KPIs be second rather than at the end to measure the changes, etc. But I think that was sort of more as part of the PowerPoint, rather than, as you mentioned in the in the brief, that you would have the KPIs right at the very front. Stephen Few.
Correct.
Making it jump out.
Precisely. Yeah. But I'm trying to see the questions as well. So you're going through the list, right? There we go. There's a lot of chit chat. It's hard to spot the questions as well.
Yeah.
But if there's anyone else who has questions, feel free.
Yeah. And I think the other one was trying to look at it. It is that, isn't it? It's like you said with the AI. Here we go, right at the end. Marjeline, I hope I've pronounced it correctly. What would you do different when it's about a monthly exploratory dashboard?
What would you do different? What would you do different when it's about a monthly exploratory dashboard? What do I mean by that? Is it more, I guess, just a dashboard for monitoring purposes, I imagine? Is that right? If I answer that correct, feel free to let me know. But there's different types of dashboards and reports, right? Oh,
Good
sorry,
evening.
there we are.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm meaning if you have a monthly dashboard and management dashboard, then the calls and the action, it's every month different. And I think what you are explaining here is more an
Yes.
explanatory dashboard. It's a PDF kind of dashboard.
These are more of your executive dashboards or dashboards where you're looking to resolve some sort of challenge or overcome an objective, right? But you raise a very valid point there that I should have called out as well. These things here should be reviewed on a 6-month basis, right? I always like to say, because you're exactly right. We're linking it to a business objective. What business doesn't change its objectives or its strategy or where it's trying to go, right? So these do need to be reviewed to be aligned to the where are you trying to go and adapted as we go on as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good point.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Marjeline. And then there was one, Shivana said, useful session. Can you show us a developed dashboard if possible? We discussed this, Laz and I, and
Yeah.
we said actually no, because it's not about the dashboard, it's about the process and the thinking. Because I did exactly the same as you, and then we talked about it, and I thought actually Laz is really right. It's not about the end product, it's about thinking about the process.
Yeah. Hey, look, maybe I can publish something, but right now, I guess all the solutions I had were actually genuine data. But the point is, it's about spending more time or putting more time before we launch Power BI, before we do any report work. Gather these 4 elements here, make them your own as well, adapt them to how you work, and then move on to the storytelling. Onto the report development side.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm the same. You tend to want to dive straight into the data, don't you? And it's almost like, let me have a look, let me see, whereas, it's a bit like, well, yes, we can show all these things, but why? Why do we need it? What are we trying to do? What's the business goal?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Oh, thank you, Enrico. So any other questions, or are we going to finish on time, Christian Angeli?
Seems like it.
Yes. It's just a little shout out to Christian that went over last week. Yeah, big claps, lots of love in the chats for you, and that was really interesting. Thank you, Laz. And I know this is something you've been doing for years. So and particularly with your role and very customer focused. So it's really grateful for you sharing us just life at the cutting edge, really, about trying to make sure that our reports don't end up in the bin and meet the business objectives. So thank you very much, Laz.